Hey, my name is Anthony Romano, and I'm going to explain to you in this video why you get hungry and how to fix that on a fat loss diet. So this sounds like a very broad topic. I'm going to try to be very precise here and succinct. But basically, I'm going to tell you some hacks around hunger and basically preventing it on a diet. Okay, so I'm going to start off by saying that if you watch my other videos, you know I'm big on the keto, on the fasting. I've been doing this for like 8+ years, depending on which tactic. Keto for 8, fasting for longer, bodybuilding for longer. Okay, there's lots of stuff I do. It's a lot of funky tactics, okay? But hunger comes down to a few key variables, and the main keys you're going to want to do with those tools I tell you are you're either going to eat at certain times or you're not going to eat, right? You're basically going to figure out when hunger is true hunger and when you're simply eating because of other variables. So let's get into this. The number one factor for hunger is your blood sugar. Okay, I have another video about how your blood sugar is directly correlated with your willpower in the moment. Basically, if you're low in blood sugar, you got a problem and you're probably going to be much more likely to fall to temptation. Now, there's other factors, of course, in your willpower. But blood sugar, there's entire bodies of literature, there's entire areas of study dedicated to blood sugar and its effect on your willpower, and that is very well documented. You can look it up. There's a great book by Roy Baumeister called Willpower on that very topic. It's a great book, and I review it in my willpower video. Now, blood sugar. When you eat food, okay, your blood sugar will go up. If you eat sugar or carbohydrates, your blood sugar is going to go up even more, creating that dopamine effect in your brain, high reward response, and then eventually your insulin will rise, which will lower your blood sugar because it escorts it into your body, and then your blood sugar goes down. And once you go to that low insulin, low blood sugar state, you are going to be hungry because your body craves that sugar again. Now, the more healthy you are metabolically, so if you're athletic, right, chances are you're not going to be as, likely to fall victim to the temptation. However, some people who are actually very high level athletes may be more likely because they churn through so much glucose that it actually makes them more sensitive to it in a way that can be taxing because it creates a high breakdown, a high rate of glycolytic activity, a high amount of glycation in their body, and basically break down to these carbs. But basically, if you're somebody who's overweight or you're somebody who's just a freakish athlete that only eats carbs and only ever functions off of 10,000 carbs a day, then you're going to experience that sort of roller coaster effect. That's the main problem, the roller coaster of blood sugar, okay? So my favorite way around this is ketogenic dieting, and this is why I've been doing it for the past 8 years. I initially got into it for sports because you have more sustainable energy and you actually gain a better ability to use sugar as a fuel source, okay? More on that in other videos. Now, you don't necessarily have to do that. You can use fasting as a great tool to perform better in lower blood sugar environments, and carb backloading is another great tool to get better at thriving in a low glucose environment, right? You can watch my videos on those things. They're amazing and they will teach you a lot. Now, my favorite tactic is keto, and it is the most powerful tool for that, especially because it allows you to really tap into fat as your main fuel source, and your body will not be reliant on sugar at all, and you basically won't even, you'll look at food like it's plastic most of the time. So that is why getting keto adapted is a huge tool around this, but that's not the focus of this video. This video is about understanding your hunger, and blood sugar is one of the main tools. Now let's move on to the other hormones that are affecting your hunger. The other areas I'm going to explain here are your leptin and ghrelin. So by explaining blood sugar, I basically explained how your insulin affects your hunger and how you get more fat mobilization in your body by doing things in this sort of lower blood sugar state and getting your body more sensitive to sugar, getting your body a better ability to use glucose, right? Let's go into the other two hormones here, leptin and ghrelin. Ghrelin is or people call it Grehlin. It's the hormone that actually makes you hungry in the moment, okay? So if you are hungry at 10 a.m. every day, you are probably hungry not because you're low in blood sugar, even though you fasted while you slept, and you are going to have lower blood sugar. But the thing is, your cortisol is going to rise, that's going to move up some of your blood sugar, and you're going to have kind of a balancing out effect there. And then the reason you're actually going to be hungry is because your ghrelin always spikes at 10 a.m. Ghrelin is basically, if there was a button in your body that says, hunger, 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 right? Well, one of them is going to be blood sugar, but that's as a result of using up all your blood sugar. But the button that's going to be hunger is pressing that ghrelin hormone. And the way that button gets put there in the first place is because it's a byproduct of your habits. If you eat every day at 10, you're going to be hungry every day at 10. There's studies where people only eat every 2 days and they only get hungry on Tuesday and Thursday. Okay, so essentially, this is all a byproduct of your habits, and it's the hardest when you're trying to break that habit. The first 3 days are going to suck. This is why starting a diet is so hard. But the way you kind of make it easier and give yourself some training wheels and going into it is by doing some of the other tactics I mentioned. You know, keto dieting, fasting, okay? Getting your body a better ability to perform in a low blood sugar environment is a great training wheel into sort of changing your whole system, okay? Your whole regimen. But ghrelin is the button that actually makes you hungry, and it's used to going off at the same times every day. This is why, you know, if you start sleeping at different times, you'll be hungry in accordance with those times, because your body has your body has an internal clock. This is the study of circadian biology, and it's a Nobel Prize winning field. So, you know, there's a lot of people who ignore this, but it's a new discovery that's really changing how we look at fitness and the discoveries around it. So let's get back to hunger. Ghrelin, it's going to go off at the same day every day, and it's always going to be hard to change when you haven't put in the practice and the habit, okay? So how do you get around this? Well, you could also, you know, use some strategic supplements like the ones I mentioned, like ketone supplements or other things like that, to basically get a better hold of your blood sugar. But essentially, you can eat more at one time and then try to skip a meal. The best way to do it is probably to skip breakfast, right, intermittent fasting style, and then get your body used to a different time. But you should probably pick what time is best for your lifestyle. So if you get home at the same time every day and you want to eat then, start eating at that time proactively. Be proactive about picking a new meal time rather than reactive about, you know, skipping, you know, a certain meal and then trying to withstand your you know, the onslaught of hunger. Okay, be proactive and change a time. Okay, that's one way to kind of influence your hunger on a macro level without being reactive. Okay, now that's ghrelin, and that's kind of one of the more practical steps to actually get around ghrelin. But, you know, to fix ghrelin, you essentially need to make a systemic change. You need to either commit to cutting out carbs, and then after 2 days you're going to be in ketosis and you'll be fine. Commit to, you know, intermittent fasting, and after a few days your body's going to find it easier. Or you commit to being proactive in changing a mealtime. The last hormone here is leptin, and this one is very interesting. So a lot of people don't understand leptin. There's no pharmaceutical that can affect leptin, which is why doctors are not really taught much about it. Okay, but leptin is like literally the master of your hormones. Okay, every other hormone is affected by leptin, and leptin is basically the master hunger controller. Okay, when I see people explain leptin on YouTube, it feels like they haven't read much about leptin, because they just explain what Wikipedia says about leptin. And the way I understand leptin and the way I like to explain it to people is leptin is like the macro controller of your hunger. Okay, so I'll explain what that means. When I say macro, I have to explain leptin in relation to insulin. Insulin is basically, remember I explained it in relation to blood sugar? And basically whenever your blood sugar goes up, insulin's going to go up. Insulin is like the micro regulator of your hunger, where basically if you had an insulin spike and then it crashes, you're going to be hungry again. In the moment, you are hungry because of a low insulin presence. Leptin is kind of like the overseer of all these hormonal activities. And people will explain how, you know, there's a signal that your fat cells send to your brain, and they'll explain that Wikipedia regurgitation. But the thing is, leptin is a hormone where basically the way you trigger leptin is by eating calorie-dense foods, eating lots of fat because it's very high calorie. And essentially, if your hunger is created out of a low insulin state, for leptin, hunger is created out of not having a lot of leptin over the past few weeks. So if somebody does a diet and it gets harder as they go on, it's because they have basically less leptin activity than before. So basically, as you diet down and you have less leptin, your body perceives the absence of signals from leptin as a message to say, hey, we haven't had a lot of fuel around here, guys. We better crank up hunger. That's essentially what leptin will do. So if insulin, in the context of 1 day, makes you hungry by its absence, leptin is kind of like the macro regulator of over a long time, you have less fat cells. You lose leptin, which is stored in the fat cells. And essentially, well, you don't burn off fat cells, they just shrink. But you have less leptin receptors, essentially. And basically, as a byproduct of losing lots of fat, your body will notice that it has less of this sort of... Whereas with insulin, it was the momentary spike within the context of a day. Leptin, it is the long-term over assessment of how much fuel you have on hand. Okay, so does that make sense? Basically, it's a hard analogy for me to explain, but with insulin, your body's paying attention to only the stuff that happens in the context of a day. With leptin, is the stuff that it's paying attention to stuff that happens in the context of a bigger picture. And the less fuel you have on hand, the more your body's going to make you hungry because of leptin. So essentially, the way you manage leptin is, if you're somebody who has a lot of body fat, it will be very hard to start a diet. It will be very hard to, start fasting. There's people who fast for months on end, right? It will be very hard to do that. However, once they keep going, because they have a load of body fat to lose, they will build a better sensitivity to leptin. And essentially, they will find it much easier to stick to a diet because they have so much fuel and their body recognizes that, okay? For people who are very lean, it will be hard to continue a diet, but very easy to start one, because if they're lean, they probably have very good blood sugar control, but they don't have a lot of fat stored in their body. So their body is going to perceive, in the grand picture, they really shouldn't be going into a lot of famine-like scenarios, okay? Because your body is built as an evolutionary machine. So the way you get around leptin is, basically, if you're really shredded, then leptin's going to tell your body not to basically diet, okay, because you need to focus on building, because your body cares about surviving till tomorrow. Or if you're somebody who's very overweight, your brain's going to stop hearing leptin's signal. So basically, don't be at one end of the extreme is how you avoid leptin. The way you avoid insulin is you have to just have the balls to start something, and that's the hard part for everybody with anything. So you have to kind of, be proactive in changing your meal times with ghrelin. Be proactive in starting an intermittent fast and suffering for the first 2 days of trying it, but still being able to kind of compensate in ways. Like, start an intermittent fast, but still eat the same amount of calories you do every day. Just change the timing. Or do a keto diet, but where you cut out carbs entirely, but eat more food in total. And that's actually where you might stimulate leptin, because your body detects a huge amount of calories if you're eating a load of keto food, but you're not triggering insulin because there's no sugar. So essentially, you'll lose fat for a long time without having to count calories, until your body gets to a point where, you've already managed the insulin and now it's leptin you have to work on. So, and leptin will be more so about the total oversight of all the calories you're consuming, and by consuming a lot of calories, you're going to trigger leptin. So essentially, I hope this has explained things in an understandable way for you, but I just explained the best ways to actually start a practice here of any fat loss goal. You be proactive in changing your meal times. You start proactively integrating new strategies like intermittent fasting with little attachments that help you compensate. Like, I'm going to start intermittent fasting, but I'm going to eat the same amount of calories every day. I'm going to start keto, but I'm going to eat more calories because I'm not getting constant blood sugar spikes, but I get to eat more calories. And then from there, it will take a long time before you actually have to manage your calories and start focusing on leptin, okay? Because you already have insulin covered. So be proactive. Pick a time and realize as well, if you already have a diet that you like, that you're currently doing, maybe blood sugar is playing a moment in the here and now about how your hunger is, or maybe ghrelin is playing a role in the here and now about what times you're hungry every day, and then you realize you simply have to just wait until that passes, right? So that is the purpose of this video, to explain how to either continue your fat loss or go to the next level, because you have to understand those three mechanisms and how they affect your hunger. Okay, blood sugar's in the moment, ghrelin is at certain times, and leptin is the big overseer of all your hunger, and you will get proportionally more hungry the more you burn through your body fat. Okay, so ironically, people who are very overweight, their body perceives that it got to a point where it stopped hearing leptin signal, and it almost, because it's not hearing leptin signal, their body actually thinks that they're lean. It thinks that they're shredded, to make it simple. And because it's not hearing leptin signal, it thinks, oh, we must not have a lot of fat here. We must not have a lot of leptin receptors, basically. So that's essentially the purpose of this video, how to understand your hunger and how to fix it if we're talking a scientific level that's palatable and understandable. So like this video if you learned something new, okay? Ask me some comments, you know, some other questions related to this stuff, and I'll do my best to get back to you. Go to my website if you want to work together, if you want some of my free guides, if you want some of my merchandise or programs, okay? And thank you. Subscribe to me right now. Like the video right now. Peace.